Hi, everybody. How you doing? I'm glad to see you here in the gathering room, waiting for people to pop on. How y'all getting through the summer? It's July 29th. The back of summer should just about get broken in the next few weeks, and we'll start veering in toward fall. Hello, Wendy.
Opposite.
From Guelph. You were here last week. What?
Well, the opposite.
Oh,
in the southern.
Ro, the Australian, is reminding me. Hi, Melanie. She's reminding me that in Australia, it's the opposite. The back of winter is just getting turned towards spring. So if you're in the southern hemisphere, welcome to the dead of winter. If you're in the northern hemisphere, I hope you're staying cool, because Europe is boiling and America is boiling. And
fires in the Arctic Circle.
There are fires in the Arctic Circle. Yay! Ish. I'm just looking forward to a time when we all go on vacation to Antarctica to get away from the heat at the North Pole. Shannon from Ottawa is here. Dawn is here. Rachel from New York City. Isn't it great to be here together? I just love you guys. And we're up to 118. And 100 is my magic number. So here we all are. You may have noticed that I am in the same room I'm always in when I've done the gathering room. That wasn't supposed to happen. What was supposed to happen is I was supposed to move like 3 weeks ago, and everything was awesome. And somebody was buying our ranch, and then we bought this beautiful house in Pennsylvania that was just like the most gorgeous thing we'd ever seen. So then got to the very day of closing escrow on the ranch, and the buyer didn't show up and basically said the check is in the mail, and has been saying so ever since. So that didn't happen. And that was a little like running full speed into a glass door, because we literally, everything's in boxes, the movers were coming, everything was set. And we were just like, what? And then, but we still had this beautiful house in Pennsylvania that we went, and we had to go to the owners and say, we're so sorry. And it just broke my heart to have to say, we can't move yet. We don't have a sale on our house. We were so sure it was going to come. And then another wonderful person came forward and said, well, I would like the ranch. And this person is amazing. And we adore this person. And I would be so, so happy to turn this beautiful place over to her. And we'll see what happens with that. But we were thinking that we'd probably be able to go back to the Pennsylvania people tomorrow or the next day and say, yay, we're here. And it had been on the market for 3 years, so whatever. So then yesterday we got an email saying, we sold it today, which was like running full speed into another glass door. And it was just like, boom, because in our heads, we'd been like already living there. We had everything planned out where we were going to put stuff and all that. Oh my God, Lisa's coming in from South Korea. Woo! So my point here is that yesterday, after we heard that so we're not really living here anymore. We're in the process of moving, but the place we were moving to is not available anymore. So we don't know where we're going. And there's this feeling of like, what? I mean, talk about a liminal space. Like, I don't know where I live anymore, literally. Now, I know this is nothing compared to what so many human beings have been through. I mean, think of these kids who are still separated from their parents on the board, who were separated from their parents, and the parents who were separated from their children. Oh my God, you guys, I know that my life is so blessed. And still it was quite like unsettling, So I took my dogs for a walk, and the way it happened was so interesting. Whenever something happens with these weird coincidences, like our realtor said, yeah, people show up and say they're going to buy your place, and then they don't, but they don't go right to the closing date and then not show up and not give any explanation or anything. And this house that we wanted had been on the market for 3 years, and to get it purchased on the day before we were able to make an offer, another offer, it felt like when things are that coincidental, I say to myself, I smell God. I smell, if you read my book, Expecting Adam, I call it the Bunraku puppeteers, these Japanese puppeteers who hold these big puppets. And the puppets are big, they're like 4 feet tall, and the puppeteers just wear black, and they stand right there and they move the puppets, and you would swear the puppets are moving themselves. Well, sometimes I feel like fate moves us that way, and often it's very subtle, but sometimes it's like, wait a second, that's just too coincidental. And I thought, God, we're under a curse. But I know from past experience that whenever you feel like you're under a curse, there's actually a blessing in there somewhere. Everything's happening for you and not just to you. So I was so demoralized after having to detach from this new place. And I was taking the dogs for a walk, and I thought, oh, I don't even feel like I have the energy to take the dogs for a walk. I don't know where I live. Because this was like literally right after getting the email. I went out with the dogs, and I was walking along, and I saw some deer, and I looked at the sky, and by the time I'd been walking 5 minutes, I felt completely fine. And I realized that all the meditation that I've done actually has had a little traction. And here's what I know, and here's what I felt, and here's what I saw. And I really want to talk to anybody out there who feels like maybe you're under a little bit of a curse, and it could be just a bad day where everything goes wrong, or it could be something really huge. You know, you've lost your family, you've lost your health, you've lost all your money, you've lost a job. I mean, there's a lot to lose. And when you have a big loss, especially if there's a series, it really brings you right up against the truth that you will lose everything. Like, this body is decaying, it will go. And so will the bodies of all my loved ones, and so will every tree on this property, and so will the mountains around me. It's all fluid, it's all leaving, it's all arriving, and it's all leaving. So you come up against the noble truth of impermanence, which is a really hard thing for the body person, for the meat self to face. But I realized, especially since what we lost was a house that we'd never even lived in, is that we go home in our souls to a place that does not change. I said this last time, or maybe the week before, "O thou who changest not, abide with me," that old hymn. If you get really quiet and you look inside and you watch the hurricane of your emotions, you realize that the hurricane is taking place inside space, and space is not moving at all. It's like there's a cork, and it goes up and down with the waves of emotion, but it doesn't get pushed around. It just sort of stays there. And that's what was happening to me. My emotions were going up and down, but because I've spent a lot of time looking inside myself for that piece at the center that doesn't move, I was just bobbing like a cork. I'm like, oh, I'm up, I'm down, but I'm not drowning. I'm not dragged by the current. I'm just like bobbing here. And I'm home. And I saw that when I go home, then I can imagine circumstances. I can imagine having a particular person in my life, a particular house, a particular job, a particular type of success. And I project onto that thing in my imagination the joy of home. So I find the blessing inside myself, and I project it out onto the material world. The only place, and that's creative power, you guys. That's spiritual energy. That's consciousness manifesting form. That's beautiful. That's wonderful. The only place we make a mistake is when we take that feeling of home, we project it onto circumstances in the physical world, and then we think that that feeling is coming from those circumstances. We think that feeling is coming from our lover. First, we imagine the perfect lover, and then we get it so clear in our minds what we'd feel like because we know what the lover is inside our hearts. Then we find a person, and we forget to come from the heart, and we project it onto that person. And now we say, you, if you were perfect, would make me feel home, and it's not working anymore. You need to change. And this is true in every relationship I've ever had, and every relationship most people have, because we're taught to project heaven, home, onto our, especially romantic relationships, but also relationships with children, parents, therapists, whoever. So what I realized walking is that if you see from the place of home how everything is passing all the time, but that the feeling of home always comes from within you. It's like the sun shining and the circumstances pass in front of it. But as each cloud passes, the sun still shines. And if you learn not to identify yourself with this house or that relationship or this way of your body looking, you know, when I was thinner, when I was younger, when I was prettier, whatever it is, when I was stronger. If you remember that that's not where the happiness comes from. The happiness comes from the essence of your being. It comes from something so still it's not even made of atoms. Maybe it's dark matter. I don't know what it's made of. But it's always, always, always available right here. You are home right now. And home isn't even your body. Home is the stillness from which you are looking out through these human eyes. What's looking out from those eyes? It's not made by the body. It's like, that would be like saying that a radio is playing Mozart because Mozart lives inside the radio. That's crazy. The radio is a transmission device and music comes through it. And the body is a transmission device and God shines through it. God sings through it. When you look into your mirror, if you look at just the body, you're seeing a home that will disappear. You're seeing a curse. Every day, a little more of it goes away. And if you look at what's looking through from the center, then you're looking at the blessing. And you realize that the very loss of what you wanted is exactly the blessing you needed to wake up to what you really are. If I'd gotten that particular house, I may have made the mistake of thinking that my happiness came from the house. It doesn't. It comes from home, which is here. And at that moment, the curse is seen as a blessing. And in that moment, you bless your own curse. It becomes nothing but gratitude. It becomes nothing but the thing you've wanted most, which is to wake up, to not suffer from this transient form of living. And you get to look out at the world through eyes from a being that doesn't have to fear loss or death or change or separation, because it is home, it is connectedness. It doesn't change. It is pure love having a big adventure. So that's the blessing of the curse. And I don't know if you've been putting up questions, but I would love in the next few minutes, if you have a thought about this or a question about it, type it into the comments and send it up. Damn, this is fire, says Kara. Yeah, it is. It's the burning. I mean, I've been writing about this in my book, The Integrity Cleanse, and I've been following Dante. Those of you who are in Right into Light will have, you know this metaphor. And you get pushed to the center of hell by losses and by the suffering of this world. And Dante in the Divine Comedy gets pushed right to the center of hell, where the pressure is incredibly intense, where there's nothing but evil, there's nothing but suffering. And his guide says to him, keep going. And he says, I can't. There's nowhere downer to go than this. And the guide says, no, there's this a hole in the center of the earth, right around the body of Satan. He says, go through that. And Dante says, if I go through that, I'll cease to exist. And the guide says, you have to go anyway. And this is what we call an ego death in Asian traditions, where the ego literally dies and drops into annihilation. But suddenly Dante, as soon as he's through the hole, he finds that he's headed up and that he's on solid ground and that he's fine. He's home. He's headed toward paradise. So yeah, okay, here's a question. Diana says, I struggle with this because then why do we bother seeking things we desire that make us feel like we're home? What a wonderful question. I think it's because we're here to play. We're here to play and experience the joy of living in a material reality, which is part of real reality. It's not the entirety of it, which is the illusion we have here. But there is joy to it that I think we're meant to feel. So I always, I've seen videotape of Secretariat, the great racehorse, and he won the Triple Crown, and he ran the first 2 races, and he won because they were sprints. And then they said he's going to lose the last race because it's a distance race and he's going to fade. He runs too fast at the beginning. Then they let him, and they said he always started in the back and then sprinted past at the end. And in that last race, instead, the jockey said, I'm just going to let him run. And so right from the first, Secretariat jumped out in front, and everyone said, he is going to die. He's going to be in last place. He can't keep this up. And Secretariat, long story short, won that race by 31 lengths. And at the end of the race, he was still speeding up. And I watched the film of that, and I thought, God wanted to be Secretariat. God wanted to be the horse that could run that fast. God wants to be you who can do the things that only you can do. God wants the experience of being us. And then even more, the experience of waking up, which horses, as far as we know, either they're always awake or they can't. We're different. We're different in some way. And one of the ways is that we can be awake and alive to the unchanging while we're changing. And that means that we get to be in this amazing, gorgeous playground of a world, and we know we're safe. I put on Facebook something Adam said. We were listening to the Sounds of the Planets. Go check it out if you haven't seen it, because the Voyager spacecraft took these electromagnetic particles, recorded them, and translated them into sound waves, and you can hear the sounds that planets and stars make, and they're always different for every planet, every star. And sorry if you've read this, but it's really good. I never would have thought of this in a million years. My son, Adam, poked his head in the room. He said, "What are those sounds?" "I have those sounds in my body," which, first of all, is a very weird thing to say because they're very weird sounds. And I was like, "You do?" And he's like, "Uh-huh, what are they?" I said, "Those are the sounds that the stars and planets make." And he said, "Oh yeah, they're calling us." And I was like, "What?" He doesn't speak very clearly. It's like, "They're calling." He does this telephone thing, "Calling us. They have a message." I said, "Well, what's the message?" And he said, "That we're safe." And then he just walked off. And I just kind of went, I did not see that coming. But I think he's kind of, in his weird little way, he's awake. And I felt that from the moment I conceived him a good 30-some years ago, 31 years ago. So we're here to play without fear in a place that is real but not ultimately real. And in that place, joy and beauty are their own excuses for being. Yeah. So Donna says, "I've always thought happiness would be a tenure track position that would give me certainty and that feeling of being home. However, now I realize maybe that's not true. Is home and security similar? Yes. Can I release this angst and demoralizing tenure security to find my way home? Absolutely. Yes. For the small self, for the ego, there is no tenure track. There is always, and the irony is, professors get to tenure track, they still die. Like you never hold any position forever. You get old, you get dementia, you die. There's an illusion for a while of having something permanent. And we cling to that. We mistake that sense of permanence for the innate security we have in our souls. So the way you release the angst is, for me, the only way I've known is to be very still. And for me, sitting meditation worked really well. For you, it might be a walking meditation. Walking is also very helpful for me. Or for you, it might be chanting or some other form of practice. But you really have to turn your attention from the outside world to what's happening inwardly. There's a world inside us, experientially, that's as big as the outside world. And in the West, all our focus, all our study, all our science has gone to the outside world. In other traditions, huge amounts of incredible human intelligence have been directed at the inside reality. And the inside reality is that we feel joy and security in certain states of mind, and in other states of mind, we feel we are in hell and nothing is enough. We think material circumstances will make us feel safe again. And we project that feeling of happiness that we generate within us from pure consciousness. We project it onto things that are beautiful and lovely in the world. Then we make the mistake of thinking that's where the joy is coming from, and it's not. So that realization that the joy doesn't come from circumstance, but that there is something beyond circumstance within you that you can only experience subjectively. I can tell you about it until I'm blue in the face, until you look inside yourself and begin to pay attention to it, which your culture has never trained you to do. You won't be able to know it. It may sound good when I say it, but you will know it only when you look within. So I would say set your intention to find a practice that takes you home, that takes you to the blessing in the middle of the curse. And there are stories about, and I don't presume to this, but there are stories about Tibetan monks who had spent years meditating, and then they were captured by the Chinese and tortured. And one of them, after being like systematically tortured for literal years, he was finally released. And he was back among his other monks, and they said, how did you tolerate it? Were you in real danger? And he said, yes, once I was in real danger. Once I thought it was their fault. Once I thought it was the people torturing me. I thought they were the problem, and I almost got lost. But fortunately, because of my practice, I was able to come home. And I knew that all of this was just waking me up, waking me up, waking me up. And so I felt compassion again, and I was safe. That's where you get, if there's enough practice. And it doesn't take long, 15, 30 minutes a day of sitting. That's how I'm doing 30 minutes a day now. And it's more than enough. And it's really not that much to pay for peace of mind. Oh, Linda says, and this is not spiritual bypassing, like, when we don't get something and we're like, well, it didn't hurt that badly, I didn't want it anyway. Is the difference that we feel the feelings? Absolutely, Linda. We are the cork that goes up and down and up and down. I mean, I really was stunned when our buyer didn't come through. I found this YouTube video of two cockatoos trying to catch a laser light in their claws, and they can't catch it. And they keep saying in human words, what the F, what the F? Only they don't say F. They're like, what the F, what the F? And that's how I felt. And I felt some anger. The guy who kept saying, the check is in the mail, he's still saying it. We don't want his check, even if it is in the mail. I felt, yesterday I felt a sense of loss. I felt a sense, and you infuse it with mindfulness. You allow it, you surrender to it. You say, this is my human self, and this is what human feels like. Just like maybe to God, horse feels like Secretariat running or Secretariat dying. They're equally valuable. And there's such a range of feelings in the emotional life of a human. And we came to experience these things, not to avoid them, not to say, oh, I'm just like I was before I was human when I didn't have any suffering. No, we're here for the experience of being human. We're here to infuse it with awakening so that we can both experience intense variety and be continuously at peace. And that is beautiful. As my massage therapist once said, something very deep happens when you're suffering a lot and you know you're safe. So yeah, no spiritual bypass. That's just called denial. I've done that. Natalia says, I feel cursed not having found romantic love by now being over 30. What do you do about that? How do you bless that curse? That's a really hard one. I watch my son go through this, and he does go through it, even with his Zen masterness. And I don't know if he'll ever find someone who loves him romantically. But I also watch him infuse it with mindfulness. And what we do is we realize that the feeling, allow yourself to imagine the feeling of being deeply loved by a perfect lover. Really imagine what that is like. Get all that yearning in your heart and then say, what would be the sensation that fulfills this yearning? How much would that love, how deep would that be? How sweet would that be? How unconditional would that be? Let yourself imagine it and realize the way you feel that is taking you home. And when you get to that feeling, it's yours. And here's the thing, you guys, really listen to this because it's the answer to all the Abraham Hicks stuff and all the law of attraction stuff. It is finding home in yourself that causes you to be able to manifest home in the physical world. The other world is more real. They're both real. They're equally real. So when you find the perfect lover within you, and you look around and say, oh, he's not here yet, or she, but whatever turns you on, know that you've found the lover. You have found the deepest source of love in imagining what it would be like to be loved. And when you realize the ability to picture that and sense it is God within me creating. And God feels that way. How do I know that God feels that way? Because I want so much to feel that way. And when I let myself feel that way, I am happy. I am my real self. And if I get attached to, now it has to come in a physical body right away, and I think I can't access that God self, or even if the lover comes and he's perfect, guess what? If you attach your happiness to him, he'll do something wrong, he'll get sick, he'll go away, something may happen. And then you'll think he's been torn from me and I have no access to love anymore. I've lost everything. That's another opportunity to wake up. That's another curse to bless. And then you start creating again from what would be the consolation, what would be the tenderest, most loving, most compassionate thing that God could give you. Just being able to touch that is to touch God and the part of you that is one with God. And then more circumstances arise to match that, and it cannot be otherwise. Everything you love, you will lose, but everything you love and lose will come back to you in another form if you continue to be love. Yeah, it's not easy, guys. It's not easy. So, River, hi, River. On days when it's difficult to do anything, how can you shift into home, into the hope and belief that you can do what you're here to do? Well, first of all, you realize I'm here to be human, and I can tick off that box right now. Done. I have fulfilled my destiny. Because if we were really here to do something in the material world, it would be meaningless because it's all going to pass away. We would be Ozymandias, the king of kings in the desert. If you've read Ozymandias, the poem, it's this statue of a couple of feet. And it used to be a massive statue of this king. And he says, I am Ozymandias, king of kings. Look upon me and tremble. I forget the exact words, but he's dead and gone. His civilization is dead and gone. The statue fell down. It's nothing. We're not here to do any specific thing that will be lasting. We're here to have adventures. You know, it's like the reason you read a book is not so you say, this book is the answer to everything. I will just keep reading it for the rest of my life. No, going on the adventure of reading the book enriches your experience. You don't go to the movies so you can just watch the same movie over and over again. You go to have an experience that enriches you, and then you move on. That's the illusion of time here. It's so that we have experiences that we then move on from, and we have to cope both with the uncertainty of knowing what will happen in the supposed future, and the fact that everything that happens will go away, everything. So let go of it. And on the days when you can do nothing, surrender. Surrender to doing nothing, and what you will find is that when you stop struggling against what's real for you, against your deep truth, which is, I can't even move right now. When you say, okay, I surrender, I allow. What you find, if you say, I'm going to stay, I'm going to take it easy. I'm going to tell people if they want to know that I can't do things. I'm too upset. I'm too sad. I'm whatever. If you relax into it, what happens then? It's what Rumi says, you be helpless, dumbfounded, unable to say yes or no, lying in a zero circle. Then a stretcher will come down from grace and gather us up. So the blessing comes when we allow the curse to be. And also when we say, because we've been through it before, or because somebody else has been through it ahead of us and tells us this, and it's like, oh, that sounds good, but it means nothing to me. But try experimenting with the belief that all of this is happening for you, and that pain passes just as joy passes, but that the ultimate home, which is beyond human pain and pleasure, never ever changes, never ever disappears, is eternal. That doesn't mean lasting forever in time. It means outside time. Time is an illusion that we experience within it. but boy, is it ever fun to be a horse or fun to be a human. So from my home, oh, one last thing I wanted to tell you. We found another house today online, and we looked at the blueprint of it. We thought, ooh, that looks nice. And I've never seen this before. One of the rooms in the blueprint of this new house was the gathering room. And it said it right there. And we were like, this is not a coincidence. God winks at us from the middle of chaos and tells us we're always home. So from my home, in my heart, to your home, in your heart, I love you. We are never separated, and everything is safe. Mwah, mwah, mwah.